Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure this morning to be with you. My name is Andrea Toussaint. I am the manager of the Leadership Development Unit at the Management Institute for National Development, MIND. Today, I will be your moderator. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to another Leadership Development webinar hosted by MIND. As you will know, MIND is the Government of Jamaica's training institute that provides public service leadership development and management interventions. Special welcome to persons joining for the first time. If this is your first MIND Leadership webinar, I'm going to ask you to use the raise hand feature just to raise your hand so we can recognize you. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. It's so good to see the hands going up. And we wish that you will continue to join us whenever we have these seminars. Thank you so much. All right. Now, welcome to the rest of you who continue to join us for these learning interventions. And we consider your presence with us as an indication of your commitment to your own learning. We hope that you have been using the techniques and tools received from these sessions. In our leadership series for 2023, we have explored topics such as leading in times of complexity, leading a high-performance culture through meaningful relationships. This morning, we continue to enhance your leadership toolkit, and we will focus on executive coaching as a leadership approach for public sector transformation. At the end of this webinar, we'll gain insights into the importance of executive coaching in enhancing your leadership competencies. You will learn how executive coaching improves leadership performance, and you will be able to apply coaching techniques to better engage employees and boost organizational performance. Today's session will take the form of a presentation from an experienced executive coach. You will also have a demonstration of how executive coaching works. We will have a question and answer segment. You will have the opportunity to participate, and we will close with an evaluation in which we ask you to provide valuable feedback using a short online survey. I know that you have been accustomed to online meetings, especially since the pandemic, but I have a few reminders. One, mute your mics except when you are addressing the group. It's very, very important so we do not get any interruptions. We also ask you to use the raise hand feature if you have a question or comment. And you can also use chat, and someone will be monitoring that. So welcome again, one and all, and I look forward to another enlightening, engaging, and empowering session. I invite Mrs. Natasha Gordon-Miller, Director, Public Service Capability Development at MIND, to bring remarks. Mrs. Miller has responsibility for learning and development interventions, consultancies, and some critical strategic public sector learning and development initiatives. Mrs. Miller, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Andrea. Good morning, colleagues. We are delighted to have you join us today for this important webinar on executive coaching, a leadership approach for public sector transformation. I'm Natasha Gordon-Miller, as Andrea introduced me, and I am truly grateful to have this bring welcome to you on behalf of MIND and our CEO, Dr. Brown. In today's ever-evolving landscape, the public sector faces an unprecedented array of challenges, from adapting to technological advancements to respond effectively to shifting public sector needs and expectations. Now more than ever, strong and adaptive leadership is vital to navigate these complexities and to bring about positive change. Executive coaching has emerged as a powerful tool for nurturing leadership talent and fostering the growth of individuals who hold key positions within the public sector. It's a strategic approach that not only empowers us as leaders to maximize our potential, but also enhances our ability to steer our organizations towards greater efficiency, transparency, and responsiveness. During our time together this morning, we have the privilege of hearing from our distinguished expert in the field, Andrée Nembhard, or certified executive coach, who has been working with some of MIND's participants on selected leadership development interventions, providing executive coaching services. By the end of this webinar, we hope you leave with a clearer understanding of how executive coaching can be a game changer to the public sector, equipping us as leaders with the skills, insights, and resilience needed to lead our organizations to a brighter, more impactful future. Before we proceed any further, I also want to express my gratitude to all of you for being here and taking the time out to add another tool to your leadership toolkit. We all know how important performance management is and how us as supervisors will be required to support our direct reports. And executive coaching, performance coaching are some of those skills that we really need to sharpen. So thanks for being here. And I will hand over back to you, Andrea, to continue the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gordon-Miller, for those words of remarks. Now, I am honored to introduce our presenter this morning. She is Miss Andrée Roxana Nembhard, a guru in leadership and executive coaching. Ms. Nembhard has been the president of her own consulting firm, Roxana Institute of Coaching, since 2006. And she has served in several executive leadership positions, such as Executive Director of the Education Transformation Team in Jamaica, Executive Chairman of the Sugar Industry Authority of Jamaica, Managing Director of the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica, and Managing Director of the Jamaica Commodity Trading Company. She has also served on the boards of over 25 organizations. Ms. Nembhard is an International Coach Federation certified coach, and she leverages her formal training in leadership and management and her leadership experience in both the public and private sectors to partner with and support her clients in growing their competency and capabilities as leaders. As an affiliate member of the Harvard Institute of Coaching Professional Association at McLean Hospital, she has access to best practices in coaching, world-class research, and peer-reviewed journal. She's also a mentor coach for the Newfield Asia Certified Coach Training Program based in Singapore, in which she coaches and prepares her coaches for International Coach Federation certification. Andrée's clients come from large, medium, and small organizations. They report that through the leadership coaching process, they are more empowered as leaders to navigate challenges and lead their teams. These organizations include the United Nations, JAMPRO, the Productivity Center, Kingston Wharves, the Utilities Regulation and Competition Authority of the Bahamas, the National Export-Import Bank of Jamaica, Grace Kennedy Limited, and many others. She also taught transformational leadership at the Mona School of Business at the University of the West Indies. Andrée's formal training includes a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University, a bachelor's in economics from the University of Illinois, an executive management diploma from the Northwestern University, a certificate in oil trading from Oxford University, and a diploma in ontological coaching and organizational development from the Newfield Network, Inc., Colorado, USA. Ladies and gentlemen, our presenter today is more than able to deliver on the topic Executive Coaching, a Leadership Approach for Public Sector Transformation. I now invite Ms. Nembhard to make her presentation. Over to you, Ms. Nembhard. Ms. Nembhard, you may go ahead.
So sorry. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we are hearing you. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I am very honored to be here with you today. And I would just like you to indicate to me when I am not speaking up enough, loud enough for you to hear me and so on, because this is extremely important for me. Thanks for having me. The next, please. Today, among the things we're going to be talking about are the following. Organizational health and performance, or philosophy and approach to learning, conversations of work, deliberately developmental organizations, and we're going to be, at the very end, dealing with coaching in action. Next, please. Globalization has presented small countries like ours with urgent challenges brought about in the main by international trade competition and profound technological changes and transparency. I'm pretty sure that a number of you recall that the main countries of the region have depended on commodities like sugar, banana, rum, and so on. And so many things have changed in recent years that we have to go back to the drawing board and make sure that we do what we need to do in order to get from here to there. As competitiveness is the fundamental underpinning of prosperity, it remains the central preoccupation of both advanced and developing countries in an increasingly open and integrated global economy. Change is unstoppable. Next, please. Our Professor Williams, Denzel Williams of the University of the West Indies, now the principal of the university, in his seminal work on competitiveness of small nations, What Matters, has as his guiding question, why are some countries able to achieve positive and sustained economic growth and some in similar circumstances cannot? Next. We're all in the same world, and the recent pandemic has served to remind us of that. Never before have governments and their workforces been asked to do so much so fast. As a result, public sector leaders are seeking transformational improvement in citizen services, policy outcomes, and regulation, all of which must be done in the context of fiscal challenges, public trust, and workforce fatigue. So how do we get from where we are to where we want to go?
Decide that you're going to take your contagion leave in a country that is
I'm hearing some voices. So closing, we have to close the organization's performance gap. We have to know where we are, our current reality, and what the improvement efforts, how they will take us closer to our vision. How do we get there? Next. Executive coaching has presented us with an absolutely wonderful tool. This program will not be able to do all of what we're saying here, but it will be able to introduce you to what can be expected from executive coaching, some of the things that can be expected. Our expectation is that when you leave the program, executive coaching, you leave the program being who you need to be as a leader, leave the program with what it takes to exercise leadership effectively. You'll develop a fundamental understanding of integrity, honoring your word is your bond. Authenticity, being and acting consistent with who you hold yourself out to be for others and who you hold yourself out to be for yourself. And I think this is perhaps the most important part, being committed to something larger than yourself. Next. The outcomes will include the development of the participants' understanding of the definition of an organization, that basically an organization is a network of relationships, and that all relationships exist in meaningful and effective conversations. Dialogue. Dialogos, as the Greeks tell us. It's about making meaning together. If people can't find meaning in what they do, then they shut down. I know that typically we think of an organization as a building. No, please go back. Of a building or something like a structure. Here we would like you to start perhaps thinking about an organization as just a network of relationships. If we were to move from the building, Minds building, and meet under a tree, we would still be an organization. What is it that we do? We relate to each other, and we relate through conversations. The understanding, we'll also leave with the understanding that growing a value-creating culture starts with appreciating the fact that organizations exist to create value, not just to get things done. How do we add value from day to day? Next. Transforming the public sector. This is a brand new era in which we are working. Recent studies by McKinsey Quarterly have found that well over 70% of major change efforts fall short of meeting their objectives. They fall short of meeting their objectives despite the efforts that they're putting in. For transformations that deliver, their programs tend to apply the following: committed leadership, clear purpose and priorities, compelling communication, capability for change, cadence and coordination in delivery. Next. Next, please. Excuse me. So let's focus a little bit on executive coaching, what it is and what it is not. We use these terms, leadership development, leadership coaching, executive coaching, and so on, interchangeably. And this has been so for quite a while. So teaching, training, counseling, mentoring, and executive coaching are all expressions of training and development. Executive coaching, however, unlike the others, support the client coachee in experiencing a shift in ways he, she see and thus act in their personal and or professional world. Teaching tends to be instructional. We are going to pass on information to you. Counseling is where we help people to address some of their issues, internal or external. Mentoring tends to help persons to retransfer information from typically an older person to a younger person. Mentor comes from the Greek mythology. A Greek warrior was going out to war, and he asked his best friend, Mr. Mentor, to pass on all the information, all that he knew to his young son. And hence mentoring. That's how mentoring came about. Today, we do a little bit, it's a little different because we have added a new dimension to mentoring. We are persons who are versed in, younger persons who are versed in computing and so on, can help their older colleagues or friends. So while there is seepage at the edges of these expression of training and development, I'm sorry, executive coaching is different. I remember going to it's in Italy, going to Italy into this gallery once and stepping into a gallery with the statue of David, and everybody is there saying, "Oh my goodness, how could Michelangelo have created such an amazing structure? You know, how did out of one piece of rock, one piece of marble, the structure was 17 feet tall, and so on." And everybody said, "Oh my gosh, wow." Apparently, this was several decades ago or centuries ago, when Michelangelo was through creating this structure. So how did you do this? Michelangelo, his response was, where was David all along? According to him, David was in the rock. All he did was to remove the excess rock, which was no longer serving David. So we assume that the persons who are the coaches are resourceful, and it is for us to support them in revealing the what's within them. So, as I said, executive coaching, unlike the other, supports the client coachee in experiencing a shift in the way they see and thus act in their personal and professional life. Indeed, it supports the client in developing new eyes, in becoming new observers of themselves. It is founded upon mutual respect with a central focus, next, being the well-being of the client coachee. Coaching is about building relationships and practices that help others to learn and continue learning over the long haul. And the truth is, it is quite laser-like. You can leave, even though the programs that we offer tend to go on for perhaps even 9 months. Most of the organizations that I've worked with, their programs can go on for 9 months and so on. But you can leave the first session saying, "Oh my gosh, how come I didn't know this? This thing has really helped me to see differently." So coaching is a continuous process, not an occasional conversation. It is a process of equipping people with the tools, knowledge, and opportunities they need to develop themselves to become more effective. It is a holistic approach to develop, as it facilitates collaboration, healing, correction, decision-making, continuous improvement. And this should have been in caps: care. Care, helping people to know that they belong. Nelson Mandela, although he didn't invent this term, Ubuntu, he contributed to the term becoming quite known around the world. It's called Ubuntu. And basically, Ubuntu means I am human because I belong, not I belong because I'm human. It is about belongingness, care, and so on, fundamental. Next, please. Next. Organizational health and performance. This concept is based on what I'm about to share with you, is based on a 10-year, perhaps much more than that now, longitudinal study by an organization that I lean on a lot for their information because of the research that they do continually. It's called McKinsey Quarterly, Organizational Health and Performance. Performance is designed on, is what an enterprise delivers to stakeholders in the here and now, in financial and operational terms, and is typically evaluated through the balance scorecard. Next, please. Organizational health is an organization's ability to align, execute, and renew itself faster than the competition to sustain competitive, exceptional performance over time. Next. Organizations are 2.6 times more likely to succeed if they have strong involvement from the top of the organization, as only the senior leaders can ensure that the right people spend the right amount of time on driving right changes. Yes, when an organization focuses on the balance scorecard, it can do well. When it focuses, all of the things, the financial, the profits and so on, they can do well. When it focuses on organizational health alone, it can do even better. When it focuses on both health, about performance, it is the balance scorecard, and the organizational health, people matters, it can do significantly better. And when the leaders are involved in the developmental process, the sky's the limit. So we don't like to address our approach to our philosophy, or philosophy and approach to learning. Continue. We view organizations as networks of relationships, and as all relationships exist in conversations, the results we obtain in our personal and organizational life depend largely on the conversations that we are able to have. When we say that an organization, if we think about it, when mind existed out of a conversation, our political parties existed out of conversations. Everything happens over conversations, and we're going to be repeating this as we go along. The better we are at having those conversations, the better it will be for the lot of us. And so, we just like continue, please. We like to quote Einstein and Confucius and so on. Einstein reminds us that you cannot solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. You must learn to see the world anew. It's about growing new eyes. How do we see this world differently? Thank you. Continue. So we are here to get results. What do? We feel trapped because we really just don't know what to do. Continue. Continue, please. So we see the desired results. We are confused, but we think, what if we could see more options? Continue. Continue, please. The more options that we can see, the more choices we have at our disposal. Continue, please. So here's this poor gentleman looking very confused. He knows what he wants to do, or he thinks he knows where he wants to go. Notice I said a gentleman. So we continue, please. And now we see new options for us to take. So let's continue, please. The first order of learning, we call it, going from actions to results. First order learning, action, results. But for us to make a leap, for us to make fundamental changes, we have to stand back and look at ourselves, look at how we are seeing those options, look at the observer. We have to take ourselves into the picture, put ourselves in the picture and see in order to see, in order to become, without putting the observer in there, we are only just dealing with first order learning, action, results. Now we put ourselves in there so that we can see more options to get different results. What if we were to do that? So could you continue, please? The observer that we are, the observer that you are, the observer that all of us are constituted in language, how we use words, body or physiology, and our moods and emotions. All of these things help us to become the observer, help us to recognize that we are not just looking at, but they contribute to, or becoming a new observer of ourselves. So here is where we make the changes. We exist in this cultural soup. All of these things contribute to us becoming the cultural soup. We take the changes here and we go back up. We make the changes in moods and emotions, body and emotion, and go back up to the observer that you are, so that you can go and take the new actions to get new results. Continue, please. So we call these moods and emotions, language, body, domains of learning. These are the three main domains of learning. Can we continue, please? Speech acts. The basic actions in language are assertions, assessments, declarations, requests, offers, promises. These are things that we do every single day. Assertions, we say, these are things that can be verified. An assessment, we can make judgments. In language, when we make assessments, we can use an assertion to support what we are saying. I can say that I deem you to be irresponsible. That's an assessment, but it is almost valueless if I can't say I assess you to be irresponsible because. If I can't say because of A, B, C, D, and E, something that we had agreed on earlier. So when we make these assessments, we support them with assertions. Declarations, we can declare that we want Jamaica to be the model country. And we can do this together. We make declarations together in organizations. We make declarations in our families. We can say, we would like our family to be a model family by doing so and so and so, but we do the drop downs. Requests. In organizations, we make requests all the time. Clarity is critical. I make a request of you to do something. You accept, that becomes a promise. Or I can do, or not, I can offer to do something for you and you accept. That becomes a promise. Organizations are also built on promises. Could you go back for me, please? Could you go back to language? So we say the basic actions in language are assertions, something that can be verified, assessments, which is a judgment, which for that to have effect or to be effective is to be, we use the assessment to support that, the assertion to support that. We make declarations. By the way, thank you is a declaration, no thanks is a declaration, and so on. And promises, which really actually what an organization is. And a government, by the way, a government is a promise to the people. An organization is a promise. Mind is a promise. If you think about what it is that mind is offering, this is a promise. Grace Kennedy is a promise. And the head of the organization is the principal promise keeper. But each member of the organization contributes to that promise. They have their little domain. I promise to do this, and if I fall down on that promise, then I would be not supporting my leader in delivering the promise that the organization has made. So these are basic actions in language called speech acts. Continue, please. Moods and emotions. Moods. A mood, let's talk about, is an assessment of, let's say, facts and possibilities. When we oppose anything that we cannot change, we call that resentment. And that can show up in the body, that shows up in how people operate in an organization, in a family, in a community, and so on. When we accept what we cannot change, then what we do is we work with. Let's look at when we oppose, what we can change, then we get into resignation. And there is a body that goes with that resignation. When we accept what we can change, we call this ambition. Actually, I should have changed that term ambition to enthusiasm. Not that ambition is incorrect, it's just that I much prefer enthusiasm. What it is that we want in an organization, what is it that we want from our team, the people we're working with? We want them to become enthusiastic, accept the things that they can change, because resentment shows up in low performance and so on. When we can accept, when we have our voice and we can accept what we can change, we roll up our sleeves and say, come, let's go. Next, please. And here are some primary emotions that can support us in understanding where we are from day to day. Let's say the emotion that we're dealing with is sadness. What is the assessment that goes with that? Loss of something. It predisposes us to withdraw or become a preoccupation. What is the learning here? It's about caring, source of joy. I'm sad because I have lost something. Fear, threat, or danger. That's the assessment. And that predisposes us to fight or flee or freeze. What is the learning? Safety, acceptable behavior. Anger, unfairness, injustice, it predisposes us to punish or retaliate. And the learning here is about standards. What is important? Source of power. I don't know how many of you would have seen some signs sometimes when people are demonstrating and talking about injustice and what have you, the anger that goes with it. It doesn't matter that you may not even have been promised a new uniform or a set of uniforms or what have you, but you are angry because of your assessment of the situation which you deem to be unjust. Joy, assessment, wonderful situation, predisposes you to celebrate, embrace life, and you're open to possibilities. Shame, assessment, transgression. I have sinned, I have transgressed. It predisposes you to withdraw or sometimes face it. This speaks to your cultural norms and values. And then when it comes to love, assessment is the legitimacy of other. Predisposes you to cooperate, trust others. The learning is that it creates safety. Let us connect. So, as leaders in organizations, these can help us to determine where we wish our organization to be, where we wish the individuals in the organization to be in order for the organization to succeed. Continue, please. The four main body dispositions for powerful presence. are these: flexibility, openness, stability, resolution, and then centering. We center. It's a place of reflecting, a place where we choose, a place where we can be still. And from that centered place, we go to flexibility. Flexibility is where we plan. It's a place where we brainstorm issues. It's a place where we help those persons in the organization to find their voice, make a contribution. The leader, again, the leader is going to bring persons on board to say, well, here are some of the things that we might want to achieve. When we can help them, help our team members to find a voice, find their voice, make and not, in fact, when we start to do the brainstorming, maybe the leader will start, or maybe the leader can have somebody else start the brainstorming. How are we going to make these wheelbarrows with wings and so on that can fly? And you start that, and you have persons contributing. Then at the end of it, you say, by the way, these are not your ideas, they're our ideas. And we go from there to, we select the what comes out of the brainstorming session, and then we go to openness. Come with me. Will you come with me? It is a openness, the body disposition here with open arms, where you invite your team members to come along with you. Will you come with me? And then you go to stability, where difficulties. We can run into difficulties. The leader can say, despite the fact that we have a problem, all is well. Can we just reconvene and fix this together? Togetherness. We sort that out, and then we go to resolution. So having decided on what we are going to do, how we're going to do this, we go back to resolution and say, charge, let's go. You will notice that we're talking about going from me to we. It's a group effort. It's a team effort. Ubuntu, I'm human because I belong, not I belong, not I'm not belong because I'm human. I belong. I'm a part of this, and it's helping me to find my voice, which incidentally is how I happened upon coaching, or how coaching found me 20-something years ago when I went to a reunion at Harvard, and the theme of it was finding your voice. We help people find their voice so that they can know that they belong and can contribute to the effort of the group. Thank you. Continue, please. So, continue. The conversations of work, we say everything happens through conversations. Every single thing. An organization is nothing more than a network of relationship, and we relate through conversations. That's the start of everything. That is, change a conversation, you change your culture. Change a conversation, you change your life. Meaningful conversations matter. And so we talk about the conversation of orientation. This is a function of leadership. So, okay, I am thinking that I would like to create a university. Is that possible? We have that conversation. The University of the West Indies came out of a series of conversations. How are we going to do this? And so on. And conversations of relationship, we talk about respect and trust. How are we going to relate to each other as we develop this wonderful, this thing called a university or a school or a Grace Kennedy? How are we going to operate together? How are we going to relate? And trust is at the heart of how we do that. Conversation of innovation. How are we going to add value every single day? We're not just going to be doing this stuff, we're going to be adding value. And we do this by how we're talking. Conversations of implementation. Everybody is a part of this. Let's call it, an example that I used a few years ago was this whole thing of let us build, we're going to be building, let's go back to that, a cathedral called, I don't know if you know the story of this man who, that's going to take a little while. Let's go back to implementation. Who is going to do what by when? Who is going to do what by when? Conversation of learning. Learning is taking place through all the previous 4 conversations that we talked. By the way, this is just one conversation. Learning is taking place, but because learning is so important, we take that out of the mix of the conversations of work just to emphasize the importance of learning. But learn from mistakes, learn from each other, and it's about developing a learning organization. Okay, continue, please. Continue. No, please go back. Please go back. Yes, thank you, right here. Current thinking. As we know that culture is of paramount importance, and there is a tendency for us to say, oh, this is our culture. We can't do so and so. That's not what's done in our culture. Our culture is not an albatross. Our culture exists. But it's our culture. We can change it to add value to our lives. We can adjust it so that we can make things better for all. It's not a prison. We're not imprisoned by our culture. Our culture is where we are now. How do we, what are the conversations that we need to have in order to get from here to there, in order for us to make those changes that are important as we move forward. The current thinking is that, most leading organizations invest in growing some of their people through high potential programs, leadership coaching, and so on. But the new breed of company is saying, if we can get so much out of sending or senior people to these fancy programs, how much more could we get if we were to train everybody? how much more how much better would it be for us to, excuse me, for us to create an immersive culture for continuous individual growth as the necessary means of achieving superior business results. So yes, we're getting value from training the people on top, but let's see how we can train everybody. Not that we have to send the entire organization off to do these wonderful programs all over the world. What we can do is train them with a view to having them cascade the training throughout. Lift everybody. It's an everybody culture. Deliberately developmental organizations. It's about making sure that everybody has access to the table. So these are some of the concepts. Can you continue, please? Continue. Some of the organizations that are doing this, they're saying, okay, these are the 12 developmental principles, but we don't have to take on all 12 at the same time. We could take some that are, low-hanging fruits. Let's go with running on principle. Adults can grow. Weakness is strength, error is an opportunity. The independent bottom line, interdependent bottom line, yes, it's essential that we focus on people management while focusing on profits, and so on. Destabilization can be constructive, closing the gaps, time scale for growth, not closure. Interior life is part of what is managed. What's outside is very important, because this is how we move this from here to there and so on. But the work inside, how are we treating people? How are we developing the individuals in the organization? Rank does not have its usual privileges. Everyone is HR. And people are moving away from HR, the term HR so much. It's now people management. How do we manage each other? Everyone needs a crew. Everyone builds the culture. This is our culture. Would just like to say that when we focus on everyone building the culture, when each person, each member of the organization becomes a co-owner of the values of the organization, of the direction, of the priorities, when people know that they own it, this is my culture, this is my organization, these are my values, rather than, oh, it's over there, it's not mine. As we say in dialogos, making meaning together, developing co-ownership of the future of the organization, then we know that everybody can be a volunteer. The Gallup did a study about 10 years ago, and they're always doing these studies. But the one that I'm referring to now, that says only 13%, 3% of employees are engaged at work. 3%. The rest go to work for pay. A corollary to that was done by Harvard quite independently of that, talks about what they do for love. It says the essence of that study is that when people feel connected, cared for, valued, when they can use their voice, discretionary output goes up by 20%. I'm so sorry. Discretionary output goes up by 20%. So what we really want to do is to have people involvement, connected, people become owners of the future. So this is developing everybody simultaneously, creating co-owners of the future. And as the literature says, that when members of staff, when the team, when they become co-owners, everybody becomes a volunteer. Everybody becomes a volunteer. Continue, please. I am going to show in a little bit. Could you just hold a second for me, please? When one of the gurus of leadership development a few years ago, when this young woman from Nigeria came out with the danger of a single story, he thought, his name is, oh gosh, I can't remember the professor's name. He thought that he could use this, her book, her TED Talk, as a way to teach leadership in his program at Harvard. And I thought, wow, it would be nice to just share it this morning with you, because I find it so valuable, and I've used it in a number of my programs. And I hope we can talk about it at the other end. Thank you very much. Continue, please.
I'm a storyteller, and I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story. I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. And they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now, this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria. I had never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow. We ate mangoes. And we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of ginger beer because the characters in the British books I read drank ginger beer. Never mind that I had no idea what ginger beer was. And for many years afterwards, I would have a desperate desire to taste ginger beer. But that is another story. What this demonstrates, I think, is how impressionable and vulnerable we are in the face of a story, particularly as children. Because all I had read were books in which characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them and had to be about things with which I could not personally identify. Now, things changed when I discovered African books. There weren't many of them available, and they weren't quite as easy to find as the foreign books, but because of writers like Chinua Achebe and Kamara Laye, I went through a mental shift in my perception of literature. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate, whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. Now, I loved those American and British books I read. They stirred my imagination, they opened up new worlds for me. But the unintended consequence was that I did not know that people like me could exist in literature. So what the discovery of African writers did for me was this: it saved me from having a single story of what books are. I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, living domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well, and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music, and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. I must say that before I went to the US, I didn't consciously identify as African. But in the US, whenever Africa came up, people turned to me, never mind that I knew nothing about places like Namibia. But I did come to embrace this new identity, and in many ways I think of myself now as African, although I still get quite irritable when Africa is referred to as a country, the most recent example being my otherwise wonderful flight from Lagos 2 days ago, in which there was an announcement on the Virgin flight about their charity walk in India, Africa, and other countries. So after I had spent some years in the US as an African, I began to understand my roommate's response to me. If I had not grown up in Nigeria, and if all I knew about Africa were from popular images, I too would think that Africa was a place of beautiful landscapes, beautiful animals, and incomprehensible people fighting senseless wars, dying of poverty and AIDS, unable to speak for themselves, and waiting to be saved by a kind white foreigner. I would see Africans in the same way that I, as a child, had seen Fide's family. This single story of Africa ultimately comes, I think, from Western literature. Now here's a quote from the writing of a London merchant called John Locke, who sailed to West Africa in 1561 and kept a fascinating account of his voyage. After referring to the black Africans as beasts who have no houses, he writes, They are also people without heads, having their mouths and eyes in their breasts. Now, I've laughed every time I've read this, and one must admire the imagination of John Locke. But what is important about his writing is that it represents the beginning of a tradition of telling African stories in the West, a tradition of sub-Saharan Africa as a place of negatives, of difference, of darkness, of people who, in the words of the wonderful poet Rudyard Kipling, are half devil, half child. And so I began to realize that my American roommate must have, throughout her life, seen and heard different versions of this single story. As had a professor who once told me that my novel was not authentically African. Now, I was quite willing to contend that there were a number of things wrong with the novel, that it had failed in a number of places, but I had not quite imagined that it had failed at achieving something called African authenticity. In fact, I did not know what African authenticity was. The professor told me that my characters were too much like him, an educated and middle-class man. My characters drove cars. They were not starving. Therefore, they were not authentically African. But I must quickly add that I, too, am just as guilty on the question of the single story. A few years ago, I visited Mexico from the US. The political climate in the US at the time was tense, and there were debates going on about immigration. And, as often happens in America, immigration became synonymous with Mexicans. There were endless stories of Mexicans as people who were fleecing the healthcare system, sneaking across the border, being arrested at the border, that sort of thing. I remember walking around on my first day in Guadalajara, watching the people going to work, rolling up tortillas in the marketplace, smoking, laughing. I remember first feeling slight surprise, and then I was overwhelmed with shame. I realized that I had been so immersed in the media coverage of Mexicans that they had become one thing in my mind, the abject immigrant. I had bought into the single story of Mexicans, and I could not have been more ashamed of myself. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. There is a word, an Igbo word, that I think about whenever I think about the power structures of the world, and it is nkali. It's a noun that loosely translates to be greater than another. Like our economic and political worlds, stories too are defined by the principle of nkali. How they are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. The Palestinian poet Mourid Barghouti writes that if you want to dispossess a people, the simplest way to do it is to tell their story and to start with secondly. Start the story with the arrows of the Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you have an entirely different story. Start the story with the failure of the African state and not with the colonial creation of the African state, and you have an entirely different story. I recently spoke at a university where a student told me that it was such a shame that Nigerian men were physical abusers like the father character in my novel. I told him that I had just read a novel called American Psycho, and that it was such a shame that young Americans were serial murderers. Now, obviously I said this in a fit of mild irritation, but it would never have occurred to me to think that just because I had read a novel in which a character was a serial killer, that he was somehow representative of all Americans. And now this is not because I'm a better person than that student, but because of America's cultural and economic power, I had many stories of America. I had read Tylan, Updike, and Steinbeck, and Gateskill. I did not have a single story of America. When I learned some years ago that writers were expected to have had really unhappy childhoods to be successful, I began to think about how I could invent horrible things my parents had done to me. But the truth is that I had a very happy childhood, full of laughter and love, in a very close-knit family. But I also had grandfathers who died in refugee camps. My cousin, Polly, died because he could not get adequate health care. One of my closest friends, Ukoloma, died in a plane crash because our fire trucks did not have water. I grew up under repressive military governments that devalued education so that sometimes my parents were not paid their salaries. And so as a child, I saw jam disappear from the breakfast table. Then margarine disappeared. Then bread became too expensive. Then milk became rationed. And most of all, a kind of normalized political fear invaded our lives. All of these stories make me who I am. But to insist on only these negative stories is to flatten my experience and to overlook the many other stories that formed me. The single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. Of course, Africa is a continent full of catastrophes. The immense ones, such as the horrific rapes in Congo, and depressing ones, such as the fact that 5,000 people apply for one job vacancy in Nigeria. But there are other stories that are not about catastrophe, and it is very important, it is just as important to talk about them. I've always felt that it is impossible to engage properly with a place or a person without engaging with all of the stories of that place and that person. The consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different rather than how we are similar. So what if before my Mexican trip, I had followed the immigration debate from both sides, the US and the Mexican? What if my mother had told us that Fide's family was poor and hardworking? What if we had an African television network that broadcast diverse African stories all over the world? What the Nigerian writer Chinua Achebe calls a balance of stories. What if my roommate knew about my Nigerian publisher, Mukhtar Bakare, a remarkable man who left his job in a bank to follow his dream and start a publishing house? Now, the conventional wisdom was that Nigerians don't read literature. He disagreed. He felt that people who could read would read if you made literature affordable and available to them. Shortly after he published my first novel, I went to a TV station in Lagos to do an interview. And a woman who worked there as a messenger came up to me and said, "I really liked your novel. I didn't like the ending. Now you must write a sequel, and this is what will happen." And she went on to tell me what to write in the sequel. Now, I was not only charmed, I was very moved. Here was a woman, part of the ordinary masses of Nigerians who were not supposed to be readers. She had not only read the book, but she had taken ownership of it and felt justified in telling me what to write in the sequel. Now, what if my roommate knew about my friend, Fumi Yonda, a fearless woman who hosts a TV show in Lagos and is determined to tell the stories that we prefer to forget? What if my roommate knew about the heart procedure that was performed in the Lagos hospital last week? What if my roommate knew about contemporary Nigerian music, talented people singing in English and Pidgin and Igbo and Yoruba and Ijo, mixing influences from Jay-Z to Fela to Bob Marley to their grandfathers? What if my roommate knew about the female lawyer who recently went to court in Nigeria to challenge a ridiculous law that required women to get their husband's consent before renewing their passports? What if my roommate knew about Nollywood, full of innovative people making films despite great technical odds? Films so popular that they really are the best example of Nigerians consuming what they produce. What if my roommate knew about my wonderfully ambitious hair braider who has just started her own business selling hair extensions? Or about the millions of other Nigerians who start businesses and sometimes fail, but continue to nurse ambition? Every time I am home, I am confronted with the usual sources of irritation for most Nigerians: our failed infrastructure, our failed government. but also by the incredible resilience of people who thrive despite the government rather than because of it. I teach writing workshops in Lagos every summer, and it is amazing to me how many people apply, how many people are eager to write, to tell stories. My Nigerian publisher and I have just started a non-profit called Farafina Trust, and we have big dreams of building libraries and refurbishing libraries that already exist and providing books for state schools that don't have anything in their libraries, and also of organizing lots and lots of workshops on reading and writing for all the people who are eager to tell our many stories. Stories matter. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. The American writer Alice Walker wrote this about her southern relatives who had moved to the north, and she introduced them to a book about the southern life that they had left behind. They sat around reading the book themselves, listening to me read the book, and the kind of paradise was regained. I would like to end with this thought, that when we reject the single story, when we realize that there is never a single story about any place, we regain a kind of paradise. Thank you.
Okay, Miss Nembhard, you may continue. Miss Nembhard?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now. Thank you. Go ahead.
I was just saying that this is a part of the listening, which is the underpinning of conversations. Thank you so much for that. Basically, what I would like us to do now as we move to coaching in action is everything starts with the individual. Everything starts, the programs that we offer start with mastery. When I was introduced to coaching 20 years ago, I thought I had gone there to learn leadership so I could teach leadership development. And the first thing that they said to me was, oh, by the way, Mrs. So-and-so will be your coach for the period. I said, but I didn't come here to be coached. They said, well, if you can't coach, or if you can't be coached, you can't coach. So this thing changed, coaching changed my life. Coaching found me, and I just could not believe that this thing had happened to me. I was just so grateful for it. And basically, it is just a conversation. Coaching is a conversation between coach and coachee. Being vulnerable as a coachee was profoundly important. We open up so that we can allow the coach to help us to get to the heart of what matters, typically through the use of powerful questions and keen listening. The coach is able to support the coachee in getting to the heart of the matter. It is an absolutely wonderful instrument. And so, without further ado, I would very much like to move to share this model with you. The new model, the basic model of coaching these days is called the GROW model. We deal with the goal, reality check, options, and the way forward. With respect to the goal, what is it that you want to achieve? What is it that you want from this session? Let's say we have about 20, 30 minutes. What area do you want to work on? How can we help? Reality check, we say on a scale of 1 to 10, given where you want to go, where are you now in that? What are the options? What's getting in the way? Way forward. How do you want to go? It's all up to you. As revealed by Michelangelo of the statue David, we support you in chipping away at the excess rock around the David within you. So, without further ado, I would just like to thank you very much for listening in this part of this segment of the program, and Andrea, we have 30 minutes left. Can you guide me, please?
Thank you so much for that presentation, Ms. Nembhard. And now we'll get the opportunity to see coaching in action. So I will invite Ms. Deborah Mills. We're going to pin her and we're going to show you how coaching operates. All right.
Okay. Where is Ms. Mills?
All right, so we are just spotlighting so we can see both persons. So we can have both Miss Nembhard and Miss Mills being highlighted for just a minute. Wonderful. So let's begin. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks for the presentation, Ms. Nembhard. I really enjoyed and learned some things from you, but I'd like to know, as a member of a management team, you enter an organization with much vim and vigor, and you know exactly what you want. And then over the period you have lost it, you're not motivated. Do you think coaching could help to guide an individual facing that reality?
Indeed. But can you say more? You're muffled in the first part of it, so could you just help me, please?
Okay. I'm saying that as a member of a management team.
Excuse me, Miss Mills. I'm just asking if you could just get closer to your microphone. We're not hearing clearly.
All right. Is it any better?
And all right, see if you could adjust it's a little muffled, but see if you could also increase your volume so we can hear.
Any better? Is it any better?
A little better. So if you can make it a little louder and get closer to your microphone.
Okay. As a member of a management team, you enter the organization with much vim and vigor. You had aspirations, you knew exactly what you wanted, and then a few years down the road, you just lost it. You're no longer motivated, but you have staff to motivate. How do you do that? And could coaching assist in helping, assist with the situation.
Yeah, but could you tell me more, Miss Mills? Thank you so much for volunteering to do this. I absolutely love it. So, you said you were motivated.
Yes, man, you knew exactly what you wanted. Now you're wondering if you're in the right position.
Okay, so what would you say has changed?
I think you have over the years the persons who you are working with, you're not given the level of support you expected.
Okay, so can you tell me, please, about the conversations that you are having?
Sometimes, to be honest, sometimes you just say, you get real blunt. You say, well, I'm frustrated. We're not getting anywhere. But then sometimes you get no response.
Okay, but do you have what is it that the organization? What is the promise of the organization? What is the organization about? And what are the values? Are these owned by the individuals in the organization?
They are to be owned by the individuals in the organization, but I'm not sure if everyone is sold.
What is your role in all of this, please?
I'm the human resource manager.
Huh?
I'm the human resource manager.
Okay, and so what is it that is what that's what you are called, but what is your role?
I try to motivate the staff as well.
Okay, and how do you do that, please?
Well, staff who are extremely motivated, I try to help them with whatever they need. But for those who are intrinsically motivated, there's not much I think I can do.
But why do you say that? Can you tell me, please?
Because when you're intrinsically motivated, the motivation comes from within you as a person. So if I'm not even sure I can help to boost that in any way, form or form.
Okay, so the persons come into the organization. Describe what happens when they come in, let's say in the morning.
Oh, you come in and you go to your desk
Uh-huh.
and you start working.
Okay, so how often do you meet with your team?
Okay, we have management meeting like every month.
Oh, as infrequently as that. And what is the purpose of the management meeting?
To indicate what we're doing as far as how we're heading as far as our strategic goal is concerned, and we get feedback from all the divisions so we can guide each other.
Is there a vision for the organization?
Yes, we have a vision.
Uh-huh.
Our vision and mission is to have the deaf,
Is to do what?
I'm from the Jamaica Association for the Deaf.
Okay.
Our goal is to empower the deaf so that they can be positive contributors to society.
Okay. And are they involved in these meetings?
No.
They're not involved.
No.
So do you think that they should be involved?
Well, I think from our management meeting, we get we pass information to and from them. So in a way they are involved, but maybe not seated at the table with us in the management meeting.
You know, one of I'm trying to remember Confucius saying that says, when you tell me and I may remember, show me and I something or other may, in other words, I may remember. But when you involve me, when you involve the people who you are wanting to motivate and wanting to help, they will make it their very own and become very enthusiastic. Help them to find their voice. What do you think? Tell me.
That would be something that would have to be discussed with the top tier management.
Tell me, you're hesitating. Tell me why.
I have reservations, but I can't say it here.
You see, the whole thing about coaching is that we need to be very open and transparent, and we need to be vulnerable. You want to be motivated. You say persons are not motivated now, and you want them to be motivated. But I'm not hearing from you that the people who are to be motivated or who you want to motivate the others are involved in the conversation. Remember, everything happens in conversation. An organization is a network of relationships, and all relationships, well, that's about conversations, dialogue, making meaning together. You have some questions?
Yes, I do.
Can you share them with me, please? Are you able to share?
No, I'm not able to share here.
Okay. But do you think that if you could share, we might be able to get to the heart of the matter?
I do believe that. I do believe that, because if our goal is to empower the deaf, they should be allowed to voice what kind of help they need.
And they're not able to do that now.
Not directly, indirectly, but a lot of they have deaf leaders, so we try to engage with leaders, the deaf leaders who will filter information to and from us.
Okay. You said when you started, people were motivated.
Yes, I myself was motivated.
Okay, so what is it that has changed for you?
I'm not seeing the growth that I expected to see.
And can you tell me what is getting in the way of that, or what got in the way of that?
Maybe resources, both human and physical resources, physical, financial, human resources.
And remember, we started out by saying that a lot of the problems that we have to do with not just those. Yes, those have contributed, but mainly, the problem mainly has to do with the people part of it. People management. Okay, how do we involve people? As Confucius says, when you involve people, they make it their own. Develop co-owners of it. So resources were better, you said before?
I don't think it was that scarce.
Okay. Can you just tell me, please, if you have you shared this with the bosses, the leaders of the organization?
They're aware.
Have you said anything to them about it?
Yes, I have.
And what are the conversations? So tell me, could you just tell me a typical conversation? How does it go?
Well, I think our hands are somewhat tied because we are an NGO funded by the ministry. So most of the things we do are guided by the ministry. And we can do so much and no more.
Okay. Is there agreement on the desired outcomes?
Agreement between management or
Whoever is to decide on what the organization is about. Sometimes we need to revisit that, What are the desired outcomes?
you think that as far as the one is concerned, I think they're aware of the desired outcome for the organization. Is just that we have issues with resources, as I said.
But resources are one, but resources are scarce all over. But you go to work every day, and the desired outcomes are the same. I'm just looking at some of the things that you said earlier. So what is it that, how are you going to get from here, where we are now, to where those desired outcomes are? The fact is, resources are going to be scarce.
As you said, conversation, but conversations can take you so far and no further.
But if you were to get all the resources, let's just say some generous person were to come and give you all the resources that you need. What would happen? What's the next thing?
At least you could act.
And do what?
Do whatever steps we take to make things happen.
I'm going to ask you, what are the things that you would want to do? Let's give me one thing, for instance.
I want to see the students excel. One thing.
And they can't do that now?
As it stands, there are some barriers to them excelling.
And what might those be?
Maybe because we don't have teachers who speak sign language. We don't have full buy-in from the ministry.
What do you mean by that, please?
We're trying to introduce the bilingual approach to learning. So if the teachers' colleges were offering sign language as a model to all the aspiring teachers, maybe when we advertise for teachers, maybe we could get some with sign language skills who would focus more on teaching rather than we having to teach them sign language so that they can teach the students. All of that.
Okay, so where I hear the problem with resources,
Mm.
but is there a clear mandate, and who is it that determines the mandate? Where the organization falls under, you say, the Ministry of
Education.
Okay, and have you had the conversation with the persons who are at the Ministry of Education who have responsibility for this?
Well, I do think that the matter has been brought to their attention.
Aha! So, what would you say needs to be done? Not hearing. You're muted.
Please select the mute button, Mills. We're not hearing you. That's on your control panel, that's to the bottom left.
Are you hearing me? Nope.
Okay, the host wasn't allowing me to unmute.
Okay, go ahead now.
Okay, so I'm asking. You said that you don't think the people at the Ministry of Education, the movers and shakers, are aware.
Yes, they are aware. They are aware.
Oh,
They are.
the Ministry of Education, the movers and shakers, what are they aware of?
What we're trying to achieve.
Uh-huh. What you are trying is...
No, as far as educating the students are concerned.
Uh-huh. This is a little difficult.
Yes, it's a bit difficult.
All right, but before because we're coming close to the end of the time, and I'd really like us to take away something from here. What could you, given all of what you have said, I know it has been a little bit difficult, Miss Mills, but hello? Right, but what's the one thing that you could do to make a difference, to bring persons into the know, to help?
Maybe restart the conversation.
Say that. Go ahead for me, please. Say that again.
Maybe restart the conversation or deepen the dialogue
With?
all the stakeholders,
Uh-huh.
ministry, the deaf, management.
Have you ever had that conversation with them? Are you with us? Hello? Hello?
No.
Go ahead, Miss Mills.
I'm not sure to what extent the deaf has been brought to the table, but the ministry is aware of it.
Okay, so may I just ask then, given this little conversation, disjointed as it was, I'm so sorry that we're able to do this, and we could talk about this outside of this program.
Yes.
But what will you do, let's say, on Monday? Is there anything that you can commit to doing?
Yes, I'll talk to management.
Huh?
Have a dialogue with management.
With a view to?
Start conversation and include the guest.
In order to?
Know what exactly they want so that we can achieve our desired vision.
Okay. Well, I want to do two things. I want to offer to have a conversation with you outside of this and to thank you for volunteering and for you to let me know if this interaction here has moved you in any way.
Okay.
I didn't hear what you said.
No problem.
Okay, but I'm asking you,
Mm-hmm.
so if this has helped you in any way.
A little.
Okay, well, thank you very much for volunteering.
Welcome.
And Andrea, we had some difficulties, as you would have noticed.
Yes, we apologize that the sound was muffled and some of you may not have heard as clearly as we would have wanted you to. But we hope you got the essence of the conversation and you saw how questioning, listening can help to arrive at some agreement, which will lead towards the solution to an issue. Sorry, we didn't have enough time to, ask further questions, but I hope you got just a little snippet, which will help you to understand a little bit more about executive coaching. At this time, I just want to open the floor for a few questions. We will not be able to take many, but I saw Edward's hand up, and then I see a hand up, Zane. So I'm going to ask Edward to go first, and then Zainan.
Good morning, friends, colleagues,
Good
coach.
Morning.
I listened to that conversation just now carefully, and I just wanted to say that some of the times the resource will never ever be enough in an organization. That much I know from my experiences. But there's a conversation that most of us need to have with ourselves. Firstly, a conversation that makes us understand that we operate on the basis with our organization on the basis of labor in exchange for cash. And so we need to treat our organization, to my mind, as our customers, delivering to our customers what they actually want. Because sometimes our own ambitions for the organization can actually get in the way because it can run counter to the organization's philosophy, mission, and everything like that. So we need to make sure that everything is aligned, that we're aligned with the organization's objective. Our objectives are so aligned. Thereafter, now we determine by priority with the organization, conversation again, what do you want to achieve first? Boss, what do you want to achieve first? You're paying me, you're my first customer. I am going to have to deal with what my customer wants. So I'm asking you now, in order of priority, what do you want us to get done? And then that conversation can develop from there, and it gives me a foundation on which I can launch my operations within the area that I have to manage, my department, whatever. And so I don't know if this approach is helpful, but I think that just divorcing yourself from your own thoughts sometimes and determining what your employer wants, what your customer wants, and work towards those customer goals, some of the frustration will have been reduced.
Well, I think that alignment that we talked about when we spoke about organizational health and performance, alignment of the vision and the mission and the values and priorities, critical. And it's not
That was
just,
appropriate.
pardon me?
An appropriate response.
I didn't hear you.
That when you responded on that, it was very appropriate.
Okay. And so what it is that we do is not just the mission, not just alignment with the boss's priorities, it's our priorities. In healthy organization, it becomes our priorities. And
That is what I'm saying. My customer's priority becomes mine. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
My customer's priorities become mine. And so I operate on that basis.
Okay. Thanks for that, Edward. All right. I'm going to take the next hand up. Zane, Trisha, we would not have enough time to take others, but I just ask that you be brief so that we can, respond. Go ahead, Zainan.
Good morning, everyone. I think it was a good interaction. Just asking if we could get a copy of the PowerPoint, that's all.
yes, it's mine. Yes.
Okay, so we will share.
Do that? Yes.
Yes, thanks. Okay, we will share the PowerPoint. All right, let's take Trisha. Go ahead, Trisha.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks. I enjoyed this session, however, this is because of the inability to speak freely. But one of the questions that was asked by the coach is the involvement of all stakeholders, particularly the lower level, which for me, I would have loved maybe in another session, mine can do a little more deep dive into this matter of motivating the staff and to define involvement, because sometimes because of the other factors, organization, culture, the staff, affects how you interact and the relationship with them. So is the involvement meaning that you ask question, or is it that the expectation of the staff is that they have a perspective and you are to just, management is to accept it? Because I always say to my team members, respectfully, state your concerns, but understand that I can say yes, no, or I can take a bridge into saying, okay, partial acceptance of your recommendation, but I will explain why and communicate it. Now, with all of that, that may not be accepted because the staff wants what the staff wants. It's a matter of how you deal with that relationship after you have had to say a no to a suggestion.
Involvement means having the conversation. You put there are certain parameters within which you are going to be operating, and and it's not just a matter of giving to staff what staff is asking for. It calls for a conversation. Here's where we are. How do we go forward? But it's a conversation where they can feel free to put their ideas on the table, which may or may not be accepted. And we'll know why. Remember, when people have an understanding of why it can't be done, and you're transparent, you're not just going to say, when we talked about developing a DDO, developmentally, this organization that involves everybody culture, you can put things on the table. You can raise issues. Not everything that the boss wants will be addressed. Not everything that the middle manager wants, but can be acceded to. But everything can be put on the table, and you have a conversation where people become co-owners of the future. You have the vision, the mission, the values, and the priorities, and things are addressed in that under the those headings.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Nembhard, for what I believe is an insightful and it was an informative presentation, and for the practical demonstration, which gave us a little glimpse of what executive coaching is. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a promise to you that we would be with you for 2 hours, or you would be with us for 2 hours, and so we do not want to go much over that. So my task is just to close by saying thanks to Ms. Nembhard for her presentation. Thanks to you for your participation. You stayed with us, you asked questions, so we couldn't take more, but we are always pleased to have you. At this time, I just want to thank as well the Mind team and all the persons who are actively involved in making this another successful leadership webinar.